standing order had been in place for years, and we had been over time addressing a number of these safety risks that around the integrity of the pipeline. And fortunately, last summer, we received notification from the oversight group that we have achieved all of the items that of deficiency we've been able to resolve, and now we actually move into a different review or audit sequence as opposed to more of an annual audit. There'll be more just less frequent reviews because we have been able to accomplish taking care of some of these safety risks. Another item that we know that RDC's probably had some input on has been a new crude oil purchasing agreement that we've signed with Marathon, and ultimately then had to mirror that with a royalty in kind agreement with the Navajo Nation. And that RIK agreement was signed by President Nez before Christmas. And so that's put us in good standing with being able to sell our crude oil to Marathon and then pass on all royalties to the Navajo Nation appropriately. One item that has taken some time to get resolved, we actually sold one of our convenience stores in the Tohatchee area chapter, and we've been awaiting the assignments through RBDO for several months now. And given some of the shutdowns around COVID, it's definitely delayed our ability to transfer assignments to the new owner. But we're hopeful that is something that gets resolved here in the next few weeks. I know Delegate Begay is probably interested in the Blue Gap and Chin Lee refurbishments. These are funds that were dedicated to NOG several years ago to refurbish and upgrade those stores. And we've been progressing through economic development and are getting close. We actually just recently got I got allocation of some of the funds for Blue Gap, and we'll be trying to get the same lockdown for Chin Lee so that we can start with those refurbishment projects here in 2021. Additionally, we're looking at some new store investments. We've been conducting feasibility studies on some areas around along I-40 and also in the Lachee area up near Page. I get several questions. It's definitely over the last year, people asking questions about our finances. How have those progressed through this COVID shutdown? And I can tell you that we've been able to maintain strong financials, and I'll spend some time on that in a bit. During the last several months, NOG has contributed almost $425,000 of funds towards community relations efforts. Some of those items I'm sure you're aware of, like propane distribution, hay distribution. We paid electricity bills for elderly and needy. We're also looking at some urban center donations that over the next few weeks. So that's been an ongoing program. We feel like we've try to make a difference there. And then finally, we considered an investment in the Gallup refinery. So if we can move to slide 3, I'll spend some time specifically on the items that were highlighted in yellow. The Gallup refinery, Marathon put that refinery up for sale in the summer of 2020. And we were asked to consider an acquisition. We approached the Navajo Nation. I worked with Speaker Damon and Vice President Leiser on trying to get a non-disclosure agreement put in place so that we could ultimately conduct a feasibility review and ultimately investment assessment. We received a phone call from Marathon last week informing us that they have decided to take the refinery off the market. I am trying to understand what that means if they're going to. I'm certain that at least at this time, they're not interested in restarting the refinery. I'm not certain if they're going to put the refinery back on the market at any time in the future. So unfortunately, we've kind of stopped all of our evaluation efforts and are waiting for Marathon to respond on what's next steps. But just be aware that at this point in time, they've taken the refinery off the market. So that's disappointing. The refinance, we were able to locate a lender and partner with the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So the BIA, and I'm not sure if they're still on the call, but the BIA had a loan guarantee program that was offered during 2020, and we were able to find a lender in San Antonio, Texas, called Trans-Pecos Bank, to step into the loan and worked with BIA on the loan approval process, and ultimately we were able to close that refinance in December before Christmas. Now, the positive thing around this, and I'll speak more in a second on some of the details of this loan, but I think what's important is the BIA looked at this loan as an opportunity for NOG to address a couple of key items for the Navajo Nation. One is to start to pay off the San Juan Basin delay rental issue that we've historically accumulated. So we are anticipating that by the end of the month, we're going to make our first payment to the Navajo Nation of $3 million on that San Juan Basin delay rental. And then the other item that BIA would like to see us progress is helium investment. They'd like to see Navajo Nation and NOG come to agreements on developing helium, and they have looked at our technical case and feel like it's very strong compared to others that they've seen, and would like for these funds to be dedicated to that development. So I think it's important as we look to the loan. It's a big milestone. It allows us a lot of flexibility now to be able to move forward with different investments. As I said earlier, we simply need agreements in place to move that forward. COVID impacts on our finances. The key takeaway is that our cash continues to build, and that the reason is that we have hedged our oil prices, meaning that as oil prices dip down into the below $20 a barrel, we were still receiving over $50 a barrel, and that's because of some hedging contracts that we've put in place primarily to protect ourselves and our loan. So that's been a positive and continues. I'll show you some of the financials. Navajo Petroleum that's our C-stores, that they have seen some impact to the COVID because of lower fuel and in-store sales. And we've been trying to comply with all the shutdowns that have occurred and the curfews that have been requested by the president. That's impacted our weekend sales. The good thing through all of this is NOG's been able to maintain all of our staff. So we continue to pay everybody, and we've also implemented a hazard pay policy for our C-store employees that work out in location as they interact with the public. Aneth production has dropped. That's been one of the downsides over the last few months, and I'll talk to that in a second, but just in summary, Elk has been looking really hard at their costs. They dropped some of their workover rigs, which in essence impacts production whenever you have a well go offline. They're not able to return it to production as quickly. That's impacted production, and thus that impacts the revenues of the production that we ship through the Running Horse pipeline, and as such, that's impacted our revenue slightly there. The final item here is helium lease negotiations with minerals. They've been progressing, but it's been somewhat of a slow go over the last few months. And I'll in a slide upcoming, I'll talk to the specifics in a second. I included in the email a copy of our annual audit, and so that material is with you as well. Before I get to that, on slides 5 and 6 is a quick summary of the terms for this new refinance. And I think that the takeaway for RDC is that NOG's ability to repay its loan has we've extended our payback schedule, we've lowered our interest rate, We have much more flexibility in how we can spend our money. So as I said, we can repay the San Juan Basin obligation. We can look to helium development and primarily partner not only with Trans-Pecos but with BIA on some of these development options that they'd like to move forward. So in essence, when you look at the terms, we feel highly confident that this is the right step for NOG to make, definitely giving us some financial flexibility as we move forward. Slides number 7, 8, and 9 highlight where we ended our fiscal year. So our fiscal year runs from the end of March, so April 1st of 2019 to March 31st of 2020 was the fiscal year 2020. And so, again, I included the audit in my email, and the slides number 8 and 9 highlight our income statement and our cash flow statement. Just so you're aware, the income statements move around quite a bit because of our hedge. We have to properly account general accounting practices. We have to account for the potential of the hedge. So that's why it looks like we've had a significant increase in net income, but a lot of that is driven by unrealized gains that potentially we might have in the future given our hedge prices. And it's all contingent upon will we recognize or will we realize those hedges. Slide number 9 shows our cash impact. And so during the fiscal year of 2020, we actually had a slight decrease in our cash from comparing it year to year, but that was driven mostly by the fact that we paid off more of our loan. We made an extra $10 million payment because our cash was building to a level that allowed us to pay some of the amount down. As we move forward, and so we're close to, in March, we'll actually finish our next fiscal year. So what I've included here in slides 11 and 12 are a summary of our current financials, where the company is at today. And again, when you look at the income statement, shareholder equity has moved slightly down, and the reasons driving that, again, are the hedging gains or what's unrealized. Again, that's kind of an accounting anomaly. So I tend to look at our cash statements instead. I think those are a better metric to use whenever you normalize out the hedging, unrealized hedging gains. And on slide number 12, you can see that our cash position continues to grow. And right now, about $34 million in the bank as we look forward. So that puts us in a really strong position to be able to execute on investment and growth plans, and at the same time to pay down the debt that we have with our lender. So really good financial position right now. Slide number 13 is just a snapshot to show how some of our metrics have been moving over the last 3 years. Our earnings, so EBITDA is earnings before income tax, depreciation, and amortization. There's been a steady stream down in our EBITDA numbers. And what's been driving that? But mostly two factors: production decreasing and oil prices decreasing. Even though we have a hedge in place, we're still not seeing the high prices that we had back in 2019 of around $61, $62 a barrel. To offset those drops in revenue, you have to address your operating expense. So if you look at the LOE per BOE, that's lease operating expense per barrel, the unit cost is actually dropping. So that's a positive sign that we've been able to address some of the historical cost issues, not only at Annis, but some of the operated properties that NOG operate. And so I won't spend much more time here. Really, the last two lines of slide 13 talk about the pipeline group's profitability and Navajo Petroleum's operating profit. We've definitely seen some impacts with COVID over the last couple of months, and so that's impacting the profitability of both of those businesses. But overall, we still are a very healthy organization. Okay, so moving to slide 14, I'm going to transition now to some awareness items around helium. I wanted to just spend some time with RDC to talk about where NOG sits, but also some of the other competitors that are out there trying to develop helium on the Navajo Nation. Recently, this was back in the fourth quarter of 2020, there was an announcement made by a company called Desert Mountain Energy that a large helium test was done in the Holbrook Basin, so that's south of the Navajo Nation, and it was quite attractive. And it continues to generate an energy or buzz about exploration for helium on the Navajo Nation. I know we've been approached by several non-Navajo entities about doing helium development, and we are still maintain a position and really kind of reinforce what we had discussed with RDC back in our Albuquerque meeting in late 2019, that we think that NOG should be the entity that develops helium on the Navajo Nation. And we're open to continuing to discuss that with you and what that means. We feel like that we have the technical and operational skills in our organization to be able to implement projects. And again, we really just need to have agreements in place. The third bullet on slide 14 talks about the portfolio. So there's 37 fields. That's not wells, that's fields. So 37 opportunities to go and explore for helium on the Navajo Nation, which at the last meeting, I presented a significant increase in royalties that could benefit the nation if we're successful. Where we stand with minerals is that we proposed a lease agreement in the Tisnas area and two other areas in the Four Corners region. And if we move to slide 15, you'll see that we filed those proposals back in August, and we've been progressing on our negotiation, kind of going back and forth on terms, inclusion of scholarships, and really trying to get to a final version. Unfortunately, COVID has impacted the timing of these negotiations, and also, just the holiday period really slowed us down. We're looking to minerals for a kind of a reply to our latest proposal. What we understand is the tax department is trying to question some of the payments that we have in our proposal in lieu of taxes. But the key item is that we're close. We're very close. Terms are mostly acceptable, and once we get an agreement in place, we will then start moving it through the 164 process for ultimately approval and agreement with the nation and the council. What's important to take away is that once we get an agreement in place, we are 4 to 6 months away from revenues from the Z well, the one well that's ready to be turned on. What we would like to do after getting an agreement is then start not only getting the first well on, but looking to new drilling to try to expand things. The model, what we're attempting to do with minerals is negotiate on one agreement. But again, that's the Tohatchee Wash lease. And then other lease agreements that will mirror the terms of Tohatchee Wash for other prospects that we want to move forward on. You'll start to see that through RDC for approval. And Delegate Otto So is one of the individuals. There's others. We have a shareholder meeting this Saturday to talk about this, but there's other shareholders who may end up sponsoring some of the legislation. But we're hopeful that within the next few weeks, we're going to get a final agreement with minerals and be able to get this on the agenda with RDC to try to get to a final decision. Other items, which are on slide 16, that you need to be aware of, is that we've also been negotiating with minerals on a new professional services agreement. These are on existing wells that we want to try to actually implement some activity to try to improve production. And the terms for the PSA have been negotiated with minerals, and we are trying to move that through the approval process as well. So if you see that, you'll know that that is again another positive benefit for the nation if we can get that agreement approved so that we ultimately can go out and execute on our work. The second bullet is around hydrogen grant request. We understand there's a competing proposal from another entity that wants to do hydrogen development on the nation. We have also put in for a similar grant. And so you've got two competing grants right now for federal dollars. And we're trying to just express to the RDC that we feel like our proposal is more advanced, more technically feasible. We've been partnering with two entities, Big Navajo Energy and H2Go, and are very close to being able to implement our project. And we're looking to that federal grant to try to offset some of the costs for Big Navajo and H2Go. I guess my request for RDC is when you compare the two proposals, I would ask you to try to dig into the technical details of both entities, NOG and the competing group, just to see who has the technical capability to actually make these projects happen. We're very confident that we can. Another grant request that's a separate grant request is through the DEMD and BIA, where that's around helium and geoscience work. The Minerals Department has been working diligently on trying to get that through the approval process. We have until the end of January for President Nez to sign that. So that one, I'm confident that's probably already gone through the system, and are just trying to get final approval on that. So that, just to then move on to the final topic on slide 16 is around an update around Annis. I believe that Elk's CEO presented to RDC several months ago about some of the actions that they're taking within the field. And what I wanted to do is just really kind of reinforce as we're not the operator of the field, we're a partner with Elk, but we have to really understand the field and question them on profitability to ensure that this asset maintains an ability to generate revenues and royalties for the Navajo Nation for as long as possible. So that's where you tend to focus on production and you tend to focus on cost. And so slide 17 talks a bit about production. Production in the Annis field had a significant drop in 2020. And some of that was, mostly that was forced by lower oil prices and ultimately the business having to question, should we make an investment or not when we have low oil prices? The oil doesn't go away, but ultimately you tend to have these step drops in production, and it takes time to get it to recover. So that's had a negative impact on the field. And because of it, we've asked Elk to take a hard look at expenses. So when you look at, move to slides 18 and 19, it gives you a view of the expenses for the field. And what's been positive for us to see is that Elk has been trying to address their cost. Some of that has kind of a counter effect on production. That's the workovers. But when you look at some of the details of cost on slide 19, you see that utility costs and labor costs end up being some of their two major drivers, and we need to address those. So utility costs is one area that we've been talking to NTUA about potential changes in our current method of how we supply electricity to the field. And so that's an important step. And also I know that there has been workforce reductions, and that's had a negative impact to individuals out at the field. I know we've tried to work with ELK to ensure that any transition of workforce is done in the right manner and that people are given opportunities to maybe work in other parts of the field if they're released. Again, as a non-operator, we don't have direct control of those decisions, but we are trying to work with them to make sure it's done in a prudent manner. Slide number, so that really kind of covers Anna. Slide 20 is just a slide to highlight to you what we as an operator do. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have the professional services agreement with the nation, PSA that we called it, where we operate wells. We also operate the Desert Creek and the Tohonautla field that's near Anna. And we've taken some steps over the last year to look at our operation and to make sure that we improve our regulatory compliance, that we improve our emissions, and that we do everything we can to be seen as an operator of excellence. And I'm very proud of some of the steps we've taken. Navajo Nation EPA and the BIA and BLM are probably organizations that are, have expressed, their belief that we're taking the right steps and we're addressing some of these outstanding issues and putting in place, items that help us manage flaring, that help us manage the proper measurement of crude oil, make sure that it's being done properly, and ultimately, as I said earlier, move towards an operator of excellence. So this slide here, number 20, is just a piece of equipment that we installed out in the field to eliminate some of our venting and flaring, and instead to combust, effluent that's coming off of some of our oil production. So finally, slide 21, just kind of circle back. Again, our intent today was to just to inform you of what has happened within NOG over the last year. The milestone of our refinance is a big step, and that allows us now financially. I think we're in an outstanding position to be able to implement our strategy. Unfortunately, it's not a strategy that we can go implement without support from the Navajo Nation. We need to have agreements in place between the nation and NOG to be able to move forward on new developments that yield new royalties and ultimately jobs. And so those two areas are really important for us to share today. The helium lease approval is hopefully something in the next month you're going to see in front of RDC trying to get your support, and we'll be there to try to answer any questions on the terms as it becomes available. We're going to be working with our shareholder reps to help us ultimately to close this out with minerals, because that's the step we're at right now, is just trying to get this finalized. The other request that I have or ask for support is, as I said earlier, when you hear of other entities, Navajo or non-Navajo, that are thinking about oil or gas or helium development on the nation, we stand ready to address our technical capability. And we are open to any questions you might have about how we would technically go out and implement projects in the oil and gas and helium space. And we would request that RDC, do similar diligence with some of these entities that come in and want to invest on the Navajo Nation, because we feel like we compete favorably with any competitor that's out there. The other thing that it's important to understand is just the revenue streams. Where does our revenues go? They get plowed back into the Navajo Nation. Non-Navajo funds, where do they go? They typically there's flight of those funds off the nation. The highlight about the hydrogen grant application, again, there's two competing grants that are outstanding right now, and we respectively ask that you consider ours favorably. And if you have any questions about that grant, we can try to get that information to you and to address that. And then finally, the professional services agreement modifications. If you see that piece of legislation in front of RDC, understand that what this is simply, it's an existing agreement that we're modifying terms to support our investment, because as it stands today, we can't support the investment in those fields, in those wells. But if we can adjust the terms, which we've negotiated with minerals, we feel like that there's significant well work activity that we can go implement and try to improve production. And again, improving production improves royalties and revenues for the Navajo Nation, and we see that as a big win-win. So that is all my slides. I'm sorry for covering a lot of material there as quickly as I did, but just want to thank you again for allocating us some time, and I'm open to answering any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. Honorable members of RDC, would like to establish a motion and a second.
Motion, Chair. Stewart.
Thank you, Honorable Stewart. Second by
Freeland.
Honorable Freeland. Thank you. Any comments, questions for Navajo Nation Oil and Gas on the presentation? Naidos Kiddush Nanda. Any questions, comments?
Chairman Freeland.
Honorable Freeland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for that presentation. I just wanted to get a little more information, if possible, on where you all are on your helium exploration. And as a council, I think we need to start looking at the future and potential revenue sources as well. And when we close NGS and Kanta mine, we need to replenish that $40 million hit, plus add additional new revenues that could help the Navajo Nation General Fund. This could be a potential. How can we do it correctly, safely, adequately, that will not harm or disrupt? I know it's a much different process than oil and gas, but helium seems to be the new big standard on the nation. But where do you all stand? Are you all in a position to start thinking about helium development? And how can that, or when could you look at beginning? What's the timeline, I guess, as far as that development is concerned? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Freeland. Mr. McClure?
Yes, Delegate Freeland, thank you for your question. Yes, so I think what's important is that in my slides, if it wasn't clear, let me try to reinforce. We have 37 prospects that we've identified. Those 37 prospects, those are exploration prospects that are spread out all over the Navajo Nation. For us to be able to go implement drilling activity, which ultimately would lead to production of helium and revenues, we have to have a lease agreement signed by the Navajo Nation. And the process is that we negotiate those terms on a new lease, an oil and gas helium lease with the Minerals Department. So we currently are negotiating on 3 specific leases. The areas that we're negotiating on are the Tohatchee Wash area, another at Beautiful Mountain, and a third at Porcupine Dome. Those 3 areas, it's assuming that we had an agreement in place. Let's say the Tohatchee Wash, because that's the easiest to get to production. If we could negotiate and get final approval, let's say by the end of March, you're looking at 4 to 6 months after we sign an agreement before we would have production on and selling helium. The reason that we can do it so quickly is there is a well in Tohatchee Wash that NOG worked on several years ago called the Z well. That requires some, you got to put some facilities, some equipment out on location to be able to ultimately produce the well and extract the helium. But it's a fairly quick process for that well. Now, to do others, to actually grow production beyond just that one well, will require NOG to actually drill new locations. Our intent and our plan is those 3 areas that I spoke of, 3 lease areas, we would like to get all 3 of them approved by the Navajo Nation as soon as possible so that we can contract a drilling rig and we can start the activity. So to answer your question about timing, our hope is that in 2021, you're going to see investment and production by the end of the year that starts to show, measurable revenues. At the RDC meeting in July that I attended, I presented a slide that highlights the potential for the Navajo Nation around helium. And our view is that, in a success case, and again, you're looking at 37 prospects, so some of those are going to succeed and some of those are going to fail. But in a success case, you're looking at potentially, $500 million in cumulative royalties to the nation over the next 10 years if we're successful in developing helium. So this is a major business opportunity. But it starts with a lease agreement. I mean, it's that big opportunity. NOG can't just go out and start doing development activities without the support of minerals, of RDC, of the council, and ultimately of the executive branch. So hopefully that answers your question. I mean, we're ready financially to move this thing forward. What we need now is to close out these lease agreement negotiations and get it into the approval process with the council, so ultimately, with approval, we're going to be ready to implement as soon as possible thereafter.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. Honorable Freeland, do you have a follow-up question?
No, Chairman, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Honorable members of RDC, do you have any comments or questions? Naidos, Kiddish, and Honorable
Chairman.
Walker.
Yes, thank you, Chairman and committee members and presenters. NOG, thank you for the report and material that you sent. It's appreciated. Want to comment to the Shinanta Resource Development Committee ni Tlinigi, the energy consultant. Naha Shidot Iswadot Nidna. J.A.D. that ego a by Yelti. Ado ego naha yanan on had Nike. I could ego a nishi the natural eight nahat idol. The policy they just in show adole they learn it least that they did a could equate it did or abahazanund cohort and the in the batting he Navajo Nation and the in the edit it is a con or the and the in the batting or the so it asked that but that in this is actually it's a agenda it always how a digido and they don't but when it opened and stock at Bantra echo and they don't echo has not dictated the aya to age husband without once is echo nana BIA is BIA has a role to play here and as our trustee could provide necessary guidance when requested. So when we're discussing energy development of this nature, I would expect the trustee to also stand by to provide assistance, guidance, and information in a way that's helpful to the nation. Because as a nation, as leaders, sometimes need that guidance, especially if we're venturing into new territory, new resource. Not new in the sense that it's not been done, but new for the Navajo Nation. So, and along those same lines, the committee did request to work with an energy consultant. We, I guess, as policymakers, we do need technical assistance and support. BIA energy consultant, and then of course, even beyond that, I recall we had not a formal consultation, but a meeting with the U.S. Energy Department, the tribal liaison office there recently. Although in line with the new presidential administration, also to seek opportunities and in the area of a resource policies and port and so forth, the whole nation in this area of new energy development. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Vice Chair Walker. Let me go back to Mr. McClure.
Yes. If I could, just maybe a quick comment on what was just discussed. I mean, we ourselves are questioning kind of how is the new administration going to impact, of course, federal lands, and but with respect to Indian lands, we are trying to make an approach with other tribes that develop energy to have a conversation not only with the new incoming Secretary of the Department of Interior, but anybody in the administration that wants to talk to us. I think what's really important is to distinguish development of oil and gas from helium. Helium development is not a hydrocarbon that you're trying to produce. You're trying to produce an inert gas that ultimately supplies different technologies. This is utilized in MRI technology, semiconductor technology as a coolant primarily. And so that even though the techniques may seem similar, and when you got a firm like Navajo Nation Oil and Gas coming and talking to you, you may question, is this an energy development step? The reality is they're two different businesses. I mean, the oil and gas development that we do at Annis is trying to extract a hydrocarbon fuel oil for its purposes in refining. Helium development, on the other hand, is something that we're more than open to spending time with RDC trying to explain what is different here. You have to drill wells. You have to put production facilities at the surface. Those are the similarities with what you would do in an oil and gas environment. But what you're trying to extract is different. You're trying to extract a natural gas and helium, an inert gas, that can then be processed and sent to market and it's a totally different style of market. So I think that, this is, when you think about energy consultants coming in and looking at and trying to advise the Navajo Nation, unfortunately, I think that, you got to truly understand that energy development and energy strategy for the nation could be something totally separate or different than the strategy that you might have for helium development. Again, similar tactics, but you're trying to extract a different type of gas. And so I know that maybe, I'm a technical guy. My background's an engineer, and I don't want to get too technical. But if we do want to spend some time on that, we're more than willing and more than open to try to explain the differences, because they are significant when it comes to regulation and the types of even environmental risk that you might have when you're trying to pursue a helium development as opposed to an oil development.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. At this time, I'd like to hand the virtual gavel over to Honorable Vice Chair Walker so I can ask the question.
Okay, thank you, Chairman and committee members. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Chair. You have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Vice Chair Walker, as well as my honorable colleagues. Mr. McClure, appreciate your presentation. On your presentation here, PowerPoint page number 8, in the middle where it talks about operating expenses, and on the side it says a new team and general and administrative. There's some figures there. And if you'll turn over to slide number 12 also, there it also talks about new CEO. Team.
Yes, that's correct.
And could you explain what that is there? It says new CEO, tech team, growth initiatives, general and administrative.
Yes. So when you see G&A, that's all of our general administrative salaries, benefits, and so forth for all of our employees. The growth that you've seen over the last 3 years has been the result of a couple of factors. In 2020, we've brought on myself, we've brought on 3 new technical professionals. We've set up an office in Houston, and because of those, the staff that we've added a significant amount of travel and transportation. Again, this was back in the first half of 2020 when we were traveling. So that is specific to myself, the new tech team, the cost that we've implemented on. We've had to buy new software, bring in some what we call geological and geophysical consultancies to help us to evaluate not only the 3D seismic survey that we had at Desert Creek, but also trying to evaluate some of these helium opportunities. So both of those areas, G&A, the growth in G&A has been attributed to a handful of new people and a new office.
Honorable Vice Chair Walker, I do have a follow-up.
Okay, Chair Nez.
Thank you. Mr. McClure, you stated that you set up an office in Houston, Texas. Is that where you live? And did you hire new staff? Or did you follow the Navajo Nation's personnel policy as far as Navajo preference?
So to answer those questions in reverse order, number 1, yes, for sure. We followed Navajo preference. We advertised the roles, and we did not find individuals that met the criteria that we had posted on our job site, but we did follow all the rules for trying to hire. No, I do not live in Houston. I live in a town called Bryan College Station, which is about an hour and a half from Houston. The staff that we did hire that lives in Houston, we have 2 full-time employees and 2 contract employees that work in Houston. And also I hired a new individual that lives in Denver. The key reason why we had to do that is trying to find individuals that have expertise that can step into these roles and quickly assess the technical capability or the technical opportunity. So, that whole process of hiring, this is something that I've looked at in a lot of places in my career. You go out, you try to post the job. If we'd have had Navajo employees that could have fit the criteria, for sure, that would have been our first request in hiring. Let me just go on a bit further. What you have to do, or what we have to do as an organization, is just something we talk quite a bit with our board, is how do you bring Navajo into those roles in the future? Ultimately, you have to recruit and you have to train. Because today we're not seeing reservoir engineers, we're not seeing geophysicists and geologists that can step into those roles immediately and be able to perform at the level that we need. But that doesn't preclude us from going out and trying to find individuals that we can hire and train. So that is really the step that we need to take next. Our agreement with Guggenheim was very restrictive on our G&A. We were unable to go and have a large-scale recruitment effort because of some of their bylaws in the agreement. This new agreement, we have no restrictions on that. So it's definitely an area we've talked to our board about is how do we bring on new staff? It links to our activity. We want to get these agreements in place so that we're out drilling. When we're drilling, it's a great opportunity to train. So we've got to, we actually have meetings coming up next week internally where we're looking at our go forward 2021 budget. What other steps do we take within our budget process is not only the implementation of projects, but also the staff recruiting that we want to do. And so, I could spend the day talking to you about that because my history has shown that you go out, you recruit at universities, you try to find the engineers and geoscientists skill set at a young age and you train them. And unfortunately, to date, we have not been able to identify many people in those types of roles. Mr. McCabe is one of those that we've got on staff. We've got to have a robust effort to try to recruit people into the organization that ultimately where I can eliminate those non-Navajos.
Chairman, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Vice Chair Walker. Certainly appreciate giving me some time to ask some questions. So,
okay.
Chair, you have.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I have a request from Honorable Chairman Aroso to speak.
Thank you very much, Chairman Ashwadi.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate, first of all, Navajo Oil and Gas being on the call here and being part of this discussion and bringing forth a lot of the insights of what's going on in Navajo Oil and Gas, and especially with the loan, the refinancing, and we're not in the dark. And I believe that's one of the requests from the shareholders, is that we make sure that we get the Navajo Oil and Gas to make sure that they update the oversight committee on all operations and what's going on inside Navajo Oil and Gas. And this is something that we have asked for them to share with you guys. So I really appreciate Mr. McClure and Mr. El Sosa being on the line. And, with that, we're trying to make this company to benefit the Navajo Nation in the whole, and how can we continue to expand. And this is just my our thoughts from here as shareholders, part of Navajo Oil and Gas, and continue to make that dialogue, and how can we expand, and looking at other avenues of future diversities on how we could help to try to close that gap of the $30 million shortfall that the Navajo Nation is going to be hit with by the end of this year. And the ambition of helium is something that we really need to move forth on that, because this is a company that the Navajo Nation owns. The Navajo people owns this company, and it's not owned by the government. It's owned by the Navajo people. Therefore, that we can try to help offset and have this conversation. I can't speak for the other enterprises on how they're set up, but this unique enterprise here is, like I said, it's owned by the Navajo people, and we want to continue to nurture this and make sure that we're not in any glimpse of in any bad position, so that we just want the company to prosper. And as Mr. McClure came on board, and in the board of Navajo Oil and Gas board members, they really thrive to look at ways to try to change, and especially with the loan modification that was disapproved from the amount that we had with Guggenheim, and now what is refinanced. It allows us to pay our bills that are outstanding to the nation. It allows us to have that dialogue, and with that, we really support and looking at an expansion and the services that Navajo Oil and Gas can provide, such as the NS Desert Creek lease extension. And I believe Mariana Khan has that legislation, and we're waiting for Mariana Khan to finish with the legislation and so forth, so that we could try to have the get that passed. But the other thing is to really have another conversation with the Navajo Nation Council in the other area of the dividend, and how we could look at getting more of the dividends from the helium exploration to be given to the Navajo general coffers, so that we can try to help with the offset of future funding of the nation. And I believe this is the only enterprise that is clearly trying to work and be prudent and transparent with their information, and even giving you their audit information. So those are just my thoughts, and just speaking on behalf of Navajo Oil and Gas, because like I said, I see the insides, I see the positive progression than it was about 6 years ago, as we came in the 23rd Council. Under 6 years ago was different, and now the Navajo Oil and Gas is at a better position, and I feel confident in our CEO and our board at this time as they're having this discussion here. And again, just thank you very much, Chairman. And those are just my general comments. And
Thank you, Honorable So. Honorable members of RDC, any other comments or questions? None? We'll go ahead and vote. Honorable Freeland, how do you vote, sir?
Green.
Honorable Stewart?
Green.
Honorable Begay? Honorable Begay? Honorable Vice Chair Walker? Honorable Vice Chair Walker votes green via text message. Honorable Daniels, Also,
Green.
text.
Here, green.
Okay, thank you. We have a vote of 4 in favor, 0 opposed. Chair not voting, motion carries. We'll accept the report from Navajo Nation Oil and Gas. Thank you, Mr. McClure, Mr. Sosi, as well as Mr. William McCabe. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chair. Have a good day.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Next, Navajo Arts and Crafts Enterprise. Mr. Elijah Musket, are you on the line, sir?
Mr. Chair, I am here.
Good. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the RDC committee, my name is Elijah Musket. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Navajo Arts and Craft Enterprise. Navajo Arts and Craft Enterprise traditionally has been your normal place to get your jewelries, rugs, potteries. We normally support our artisans by purchasing from them. So whenever they create products, they bring it to NACE and we purchase them and we resell them. Currently, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to follow the executive orders of the Navajo Nation, which deemed NACE as a non-essential business. So we've been closed since March. We were allowed to open under orange status when the nation allowed non-essential businesses to operate in August. We operated for roughly August, September, October, 3 months, and then we were shut down again. So I have shared a PowerPoint presentation. And you can see slide 2, which has the gross sales. And you can see that in 2019, our gross sales was about $12.7 million. And then in 2020, our gross sales drastically went down. We made $3.3 million overall. Because we were closed, we had to try to find other avenues of trying to generate some revenue. So we concentrated on doing online sales, try to do curbside with stores we had, but those sales aren't the same as doing face-to-face transactions. Also, it's quite time-consuming to kind of do those kind of sales. It requires some resources to maintain that kind of interaction between the customers. The team here, the sales team, began to do FaceTime and Duo and the Apple apps to do like personal shopping for December. So we did that also to try to generate some revenue, and we actually made about $3.3 million. And then if you can move to the next slide, which is our accounts receivable. Normally, accounts receivable is what we usually depend on for the majority of the year. So normally we do a large accounts receivable during our last fourth quarter, which is October, November, December. That's when our retail is usually pretty high. Everybody's getting their Christmas gifts. So traditionally, by the beginning of the year, we usually have about $4 million accounts receivable, which will sustain Arts and Crafts and operating expense until we, start the whole thing all over again. And you can see that in 2020, we had reduced our accounts receivable from $4.1 million in 2019 to $774,000, which is considerably down by 81%. And then if you can move to the next slide, normally what we do is we do our artisan payments. This is what we bought from the artisans to resell. In 2019, we did $1.7 million. In 2020, we did $432,000. That's a difference of $1.2 million. So that decreased 75%. If you move to the next slide, and these are just generally our operating expense, and this doesn't include the payroll. In 2019, we did $1.7 million as operating expenses. In 2020, we did $1 million. So we really worked hard to try to decrease the operating expenses. So it's a 40% difference between 2019 and 2020. Then if you can go and turn into the next slide, you'll see that the NACE employees payroll, our payroll, we had $3.2 million for 2019. And then in 2020, we had $2.4 million. So we reduced it down a little. And we did that by applied for a PPP loan in March, which we were able to get, which was about $500,000, which we used toward payroll. And we allowed the staff to follow the order, and then we also used some of our own resources to allow the staff to stay at home and follow the order. And then by the time July came in 2019, we had to make a decision. So we started to furlough employees and on and off, trying to keep the operating expense as low as possible. So that's how we were able to reduce that payroll. Currently, right now, we have staff here. We're trying to finish up our inventory so we can complete our audit. After the inventory is complete, we plan to furlough the employees that are not needed. So that's going to happen in the next week. So concurrently, we are asking RDC for two things. First, we'd ask RDC to support or for legislation to allow Navajo Arts and Craft Enterprise to operate at 10%. New Mexico is currently operating in red status and they're allowed 25%. We're only asking for 10%, which would be about equivalent to in Window Rock, Tuba City, and Shiprock to about 8 to 9 people in the store at one time. And then for Chinle and Kienta, that would be equivalent to about 4 or 5 people because of the square footage. And second, we are asking for a request for $2 million in monetary assistance to pay for payroll for 2021. And that's about it, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Musket. Honorable members of RDC, I'd like to establish a motion and a second.
Chairman,
Honorable Walker, second by
I'll second Stewart.
Honorable Stewart. Any questions, comments? There's 2 requests. One, a legislation to allow Navajo Arts and Crafts Enterprise to operate at 10%. Also a request for $2 million in monetary relief. So any questions, comments?
Comment, Chair.
Honorable Stewart, you have the floor, sir.
Okay, thank you, Shania. Honored Mr. Musket and staff as well from NACE or Arts and Craft. As RDC is aware, I am a part of the board for NACE, and we have been talking about these issues with NACE and how it is very difficult for the staff to and the enterprise to continue operations, especially during this time pandemic. At one time, they did reopen, and if any of you had a chance to go by when they were reopened. And I commended the staff on this, and the plan that they put forward was that they had a good plan to stay open. They had the plexiglass in place, they had a hand washing station in place, temperature check, and they allowed only so many customers to go in and do their business and then leave. But then when President Nez decided to close again, that's when NACE closed and was not reopened again. To this day, we're still struggling. We're trying to find ways, and the best way to do this in our board meetings is to reopen the stores at 10%. That would generate the revenues to keep the staff employed, to keep funding coming into the enterprise and to the nation as well. And right now, during the holidays, they did do some online and curbside pickup, but that limited the staff and the customers as well to do their shopping, because you have staff on the floor trying to pick out items for customers. And then when the customer does come to pick it up, it's either not what the customer wanted, or it's not what was in stock. So this is why we're asking as a board, and I did mention it to the board and to Mr. Musket to do a presentation back to RDC, since we are the oversight, so that we could hear what is going on with the NACE enterprise, and so that all of you as my brothers can go over there for Valentine's and buy all your wives and your children stuff for Valentine's. So that's what we're looking at. So we're asking for support and in that manner. So that's what I want to share, Chair, and I'll turn back the floor over to you guys.
Thank you, Honorable Stewart. Sunantai, RDC, do you have any comments or questions? Then, Hakoshila.
Chairman.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Freeland, thank you. I appreciate Mr. Musket, the presentation and what you had reported to RDC. I'm a customer of NACE. I'm very appreciative of that. And, I don't know about Valentine's, what my brother just mentioned, but, I just want to encourage you all to continue to work with the Navajo people and doing what you're doing, and continue to find ways to, I know times are tough economically, business-wise, it's not easy, it's challenging, but more importantly, I just want to encourage you all to continue on that path to seek revenues and seek ways of making NACE grow and move forward and prosper. I guess I bring up the Crown Point store as well. Eventually, I'd like to see the Crown Point store come back into fruition. I did go by there a few times, and yes, it's a small store, but it's something different and unique, and we need that in our area. And if there's ever a way to bring back that store, please, I'll be supportive of that and really help any way that I can, and hope that we can look at bringing back a development of sorts back to Crown Point. That shopping center is getting a little empty right now. But yeah, Chairman, I just want to mention that and encourage NACE, and I appreciate my brother being on the board, my little brother being on the board, but I want to say thank you and Happy New Year to NACE and to all of our enterprises and businesses. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Nantai. If there's no further comments or questions, we'll go ahead and vote to accept the report. Kushina, Honorable Freeland, how do you vote, sir?
Green.
Honorable Stewart?
Green.
Honorable Begay?
Kial votes green.
Honorable Vice Chair Walker,
Chairman, I vote green.
Honorable Daniels, Honorable Daniels, I don't know if this is the text message from Honorable Daniels. He says green on report. If it's the earlier one or the same one. Honorable Daniels? We have a vote of 4 in favor, 0 opposed. Sure not voting. He did text, so he did vote green, so it'll be 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Sure not voting. Motion carries. Yeah. And next, DCD, Dr. Yellowman. Are you on the line? Dr. Yellowman? Sam Woods, are you on the line? Division of Natural Resources.
Mr. Chair, I'm right here.
Okay, you have the floor, Mr. Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say Yad A and Happy New Year to the members of the Resources and Development Committee. I'll keep my verbal report short and sweet. And really what I wanted to update, Mr. Chair and members of the RDC and guests and also staff that are on the call is the really the status of the 500 megawatt revenue and repayment fund, which we call the 500 megawatt fund, as described in CD 93-20. Before I begin and talk a little bit more in depth about the report or the 500 megawatt fund, I want to again just introduce myself in Navajo. Sam was a Yinchia. Hachination, look at the name, Bashchin, Kobai, Dashache, Aro, Closoflane, Dashana, a Dadines Finishla. As some of you may be aware of this, I have been before the RDC a few times as a consultant and business person looking to resurrect the old Navajo transmission project with some of my Navajo colleagues, and also put forth a resolution to look at other grant funding for a resource that could be very valuable for the Navajo Nation in the years to come. So, and also, as far as where I'm at today and why I am on this call and giving this report is that I do have a professional service contract with the Division of Natural Resources, and I do work with DNR and the Navajo Land Commission on the developments of the Bistite Solar Project in Herfino, New Mexico. So, in addition to that work or that professional service contract that I had, DNR has updated my scope of work to include the development of a fund management plan for the Energy Office, the development and framework for the 500 megawatt fund plan, standardizing leasing efforts for renewable energy projects, update the Navajo energy policy, develop a strategic energy plan, and provide any relevant background information on Navajo's electric transmission and generation projects, and eventually train up any upcoming energy professionals to step into the role of the future Energy Office or some of the roles for the Energy Office. So with this additional work, I come before you to push or to report about a Navajo energy related initiative called the 500 megawatt fund. And as you may be aware that President Nez did sign CD 93-20 into law on the 20th of December 2020. And CD 93-20 is is approving supplemental funding from the UUFB for about 1.985 million for the 2021 transmission charge for the Navajo Nation's use of the 500 megawatts of electricity pursuant to the NGS extension lease and underlying transmission agreement with the Bureau of Reclamation. And at this time, DNR is now working putting together a rough draft of that 500 megawatt fund, but it requires, some reviews from Department of Justice, the Office of the Controller, and OMB. And the way we're looking at structuring this 500 megawatt fund will involve the 4 directives that were ordered by Council under CD 9320. And those directives are for DNR to work with OOC and OOMB to establish a fund management plan and to look at the repayment of previous debt for the 500 megawatt transmission costs for 2020 in the amount of 1.9 million and for the 2021 in the amount of 1.985 million. And to establish a repayment of the recurring transmission charges over the next 8 years. And also, if there's any funding that could be available, is to structure a plan to fund any energy-related projects for Navajo. And that really has to go through a process which is really recommendation by DNR and OPVP, then final approval is granted by the Resources and Development Committee. Also in CD 9320 is to provide a high-level report to the Resources and Development Committee on that draft fund management plan by the end of this month. And that's the reason why I'm here today. And the reason, and also what we'll do again is come back before the RDC, hopefully in the first or the second week of February 2021, to provide that draft 500 megawatt fund plan. So then eventually, go before BNF and again RDC for the approval of that plan before the end of February 2021. So some of the things that I have done in the past few days is really to go back and to perform some light due diligence on the BOR, the Bureau of Reclamation, WAPA Navajo Transmission Agreement that was executed back in 2017, and strategically look at that agreement and come up with a strategic plan for the 500 megawatt fund plan. And again, the plan will set, the direction of how we're going to proceed forward with the repayment and the payment of recurring annual transmission costs, and also foster a proactive plan to grow the fund to address new opportunities and challenges for Navajo. And today, really, I just wanted to cover the built-up or the makeup of the annual transmission costs in terms of what are we really paying for in terms of the recent payment that was made for about 1.9 million. And I want to go through that with you today. And from what we understand today is that the annual transmission cost comprises of 4 different sets of costs. And the first sets of costs are the average or 50% of the costs for reclamation and WAPA's annual expenses, plus the U.S. annual shares of operating expenses. And then that number is, or that value is multiplied by the nation's percentage share of the U.S. share in the Navajo Southern Transmission System. The second set of costs is exactly the same formula, but it's the nation's percentage share of the U.S. share in the Navajo Western Transmission System. So there's 2 transmission systems that Navajo was given capacity and uses for, which is the Southern Transmission System, which runs from Navajo Generating Station down to North Phoenix, and then the Western Transmission System from NGS all the way into Marketplace or southeast Nevada. And the third set of costs is part of the second set of costs that consists of the ratio of the Navajo Southern transfer capabilities over the total Navajo Southern Transmission U.S. entitlement transfer capability times the actual annual cost for the operations of the Navajo Southern Transmission System. So you have about three sets of costs that I explained. And then finally, the last cost is really, you add all of that up and you subtract the transmission revenues, which equates to the annual transmission cost. In this case, for 2021, it was just over $1.9 million. So what BOR really does is that what we paid for is really a prepaid or an estimate of what to expect for transmission costs for the following year. So then what the Bureau of Reclamation does is that they go back and they true up the costs. Or what they do is they perform the year-end adjustments when all the actual costs are submitted by the transmission operators. Like, for example, LADWP is the transmission operator for Western, and APS is the transmission operator for Southern. And when all those actual costs come in, then what happens is that is adjusted against the estimate that Navajo paid for. So generally, if there's a difference, meaning that if we paid a little bit more than what were the actual costs, that refund goes back to the Navajo Nation. Now, it also works the other way around, where if the actual costs were more than the estimate that Navajo paid, then we have to go back and pay for those actual costs. So then eventually, any general funds will eventually go back into any refund will go back into the general fund. So right now at this time, the way we're looking at this asset that was acquired by Navajo, and in order for the nation to make any more revenues from the 500 megawatts, several actions need to be set into motion. And the first is analyzing if another marketing manager other than WAPA would make sense for the nation. And what I mean by that is that a new marketing manager would then be placed under maybe a professional services agreement or a contract, and they would manage and operate and fully use that 500 megawatts of transmission capacity and put that capacity to work for Navajo. Now, in order to do that if that were to happen, the selected marketing manager would require some legislative efforts, and also it would also require some legislative efforts into the WAPA, the Bureau of Reclamation Navajo transmission contract. And in that contract, WAPA is the selected marketing manager. So there has to be some revisions to that contract, and also a professional services agreement for the new marketing manager to come on board. So at this time, we're going to look at both of them to determine what is really the best path or the best avenue for Navajo to continue forward with this. So the next one is really, which is somewhat of a big one, is the nation has to look at the utilization of those 500 megawatts. So what that means is that there has to be a large a very large Navajo renewable energy project that has to be developed and put into place to absorb the annual transmission cost. And, you know, I talked about that transmission cost already, and it averages right now about 1.9 million. So the only way you can absorb that transmission cost is that there has to be a large energy project or renewable energy project to absorb that transmission cost. And when that happens, then you can definitely look at making potential revenues from the 500 megawatt. And once you do make those potential revenues, in return, those revenues can be put into place to provide the annual recurring transmission costs and any future administrative costs for the future Navajo Energy Office, and also the funding of any future Navajo related energy projects. So one of the things that that we're doing right now is working on that draft 500 megawatt fund plan, and hopefully we should have that in the first week or maybe the second week of February 2021. And the way we're looking at this is that the plan will contain just a number of different comprehensive, or maybe an outline, a robust outline in terms of how we're going to move forward with the plan. I think the way forward to share this with the RDC is to schedule a work session or maybe a leadership meeting with RDC during that first week to explain the details of the transmission costs, and to provide a little bit more detail and insights on what those costs really mean, and how do we get something developed on Navajo for that project to absorb those transmission costs and to really to eventually ultimately make revenues. So and at this time we're still gathering some information from the Bureau of Reclamation and WAPA on the cost, and looking at the relative options and how to put that 500 megawatts to use for Navajo. So, Mr. Chair, members of the Resources and Development Committee, I know it went by really quick. This is my verbal report to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. Honorable members of RDC, I'd like to establish a motion and a second.
Motion, Stuart.
Motion. And I. Motion.
Second, Freeland.
Who motion?
I did. Stuart.
Okay. Honorable Stewart motion, second by Honorable Freeland. Do you have any questions for Mr. Woods? Mr. Woods, if you would kindly draft up your plan and the presentation, we would appreciate that.
Yes,
Mr.
I will,
Woods?
Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any comments, questions, Nanda? Then, yeah. Thank you. Honorable Walker, go ahead.
Yes, Chairman, members, staff, legislative council, though, Agido, Sheikh Hassan, Shanantado, Tadais, our good colleagues that are on this call, so, yet, although, presenter, though, Mr. Woods, I have a question on, I guess, your consultant work. What's the duration of that work? I guess how long are you going to be working on this in this area with the 500 megawatt transmission and what you reported on today? What's I guess I know the foreseeable future on this although I do recall not too long ago you were with another group that had information on the same, and then with interest in the transmission. So not too long ago that you were before the RDC with information on the transmission line. Well, a couple times, though, with one organization that had some interest in leasing that. So today you are working as a consultant for DNR. I appreciate the information. I guess trying to figure out how what the plan is from here on. I would appreciate if Dr. Shabala, the executive director for DNR, would be accompanying a report like this. So that's my question, Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. Woods, your response?
Mr. Chair and Vice Chair Walker, I thank you for your question. And you question how long is my work to work on this on this 500 megawatt fund. And currently, right now, I have a contract for 3 months to help Division of Natural Resources and eventually get this 500 megawatt fund, as I described, into where we get it before the RDC and the Budget and Finance Committee before the end of February 2021. As I stated before, I did come before RDC a few times as a business person looking to resurrect the old Navajo transmission project. And that transmission project is really a project development project where we looked at asking the nation for an assignment of all the old records and documents for the Navajo transmission project, and eventually dust off all of those documents and to see if we can actually put that project back into or getting the project back in compliance and getting that project back into a work in progress. Then eventually, if the nation would want to proceed forward with the project again, it's the nation's project, and that's also a Navajo Nation project. So really, there's two different things here. The first one is providing technical services under a professional services agreement with Division of Natural Resources to help with the 500 megawatt fund plan. The second one was actually as a business person looking to resurrect the old Navajo transmission project.
Mr. Woods?
Yes.
Are you done?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Honorable Walker, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, Chairman and committee members and Mr. Woods. Okay, appreciate the response there. To add to the request Chairman had made, asking for some written material on your report, that would be really helpful. As you all know, the communities that I represent on the western edge of the Navajo Nation, that's where some of this power line infrastructure is located, and that's where they exit off the Navajo Nation into the different areas west and south. it she bakwalasin thousand she could echo by yatio hit net update the cat in the shadow update it and update could echo shananta or tabana season. Thank you, Chairman.
Kushila, Honorable Vice Chair Walker. Any other comments or questions? RDC? Kushila, we'll go ahead and vote and accept the report from Mr. Woods. Honorable Freeland, how do you vote?
Green.
Honorable Stewart?
Green.
Honorable Begay? Honorable Vice Chair Walker?
Chairman, I vote green. Thank you.
Honorable Daniels?
I vote green.
Thank you. We have a vote of 4 in favor, 0 opposed. Chair not voting. Motion carries. We'll accept the report from Mr. Woods. Thank you, Mr. Woods.
Thank you.
Next, I somehow skipped the Net Chamber of Commerce report, which was under C. So, Mr. Jefferson Begay, are you on the line? Mr. Jefferson Begay? None? What about Dr. Yellowman? Are you on the line now?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. You have the floor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Honorable members of RDC committee, thank you for giving me this time. I just wanted to share with you and provide a brief update on the New Mexico capital outlay projects. I also wanted to share that we are and have been in communications with New Mexico Indian Affairs Department in explaining, very similar to the legislation going forward with the Citizen Project, and our request and communication with New Mexico IAD for an extension to help us address the past year or the past 11 months that we have been focused on COVID. As we've shared before, DCD and the nation, we have gone into emergency declaration March 13th, and as such, since then, over 30 public health orders have been issued. And DCD, Division of Community Development, our staff, and because of the closures, our staff have been and our division have been impacted. I really want to focus on CPMD, honorable members. With CPMD, we have just a little under 20 staff that come into the building. Normally, we have other project managers, one that reports to Crown Point and another one that reports to Shiprock. They have been maintaining their status in reporting to their workplace or commuting. When the nation closed, the government closure went into effect. We were limited to 25% occupancy, and we really had to strategize on between the departments of CHID, ASC, and CPMD, and DCD administration. But it was very difficult to keep the number of around 15, that's 25 to 30%. 15 is what we could limit to the building. And as such, that was very difficult. There were times where I would have to tell CHID staff to stay home and work from home, and ASC, just so that we could have as many CPMD staff here working on projects. So I just want to share a little bit about how challenging it has been to focus on the COVID-19 relief efforts and carry out the CARES Act funding projects and still maintain our regular operation of capital management projects. And I just want to share briefly how we kind of had to strategize with staff. Since then, CPMD, they do report weekly. They report every Monday, and they have a department update and department check-in every Monday. And many of our staff have been trying to work on their project profile. And many of our projects do not, all of our projects are in coordination and need to be coordinated with OMB, DOJ, and OOC. We cannot do these projects in isolation. We rely heavily on the availability of OOC, OMB, and DOJ, and the business review for these projects and contracts. So with that being said, I just want to share that in our communications, I'll briefly share our House Bill 355. These are our reauthorization projects, our 355. They have been reauthorized through 2022. And I apologize, I will be sending my report over here briefly. And on our reauthorization for House Bill 355, we have 13 projects that have been reauthorized through 2022. On our Senate Bill 280, we do have quite a few projects here. And in our project listing here, I want to add that we have been executing the IGAs and and moving forward on these projects. Before I get to in detail on 280, I want to briefly share House Bill 349. 349, we do have projects under Environmental Department, and we have projects with the New Mexico Indian Affairs Project. For House Bill 349, we have 16 projects. And for the Environmental Department, we have 15 projects. I do want to add, and these are early conversations that we are having with NDOH, but under Senate Bill 207, we are trying to assist NDOH with all of these senior citizen center improvements and renovation projects under 207. There have been some projects that NDOH has taken on, but again, they have been focused primarily on COVID-19 for the last year. These projects have been impacted under 207. And again, we are coordinating efforts to assist NDOH on project management for these projects. And again, that is for Senate Bill 207, and these are the aging and long-term projects. We do have some reauthorized projects under House Bill 349. There's a total of 15 projects there. They include projects such as the San Juan Lateral Water Project. They include water system improvement, wastewater lines, water systems. Many of them are water projects, but they have been reauthorized under 349. These projects are pre-existing. They are listed in prior bills, so they are not in the total amount allocated under 349. They had just been reauthorized in House Bill 349. And then for our House Bill 280, House Bill 280, we do have projects that are being executed right now under the IGAs. We have a total of sorry, I just want to make sure I count them right. $30, $31. Yeah. And 60 projects there. So we are in communications with New Mexico IED. We have been impacted by way of capacity, and that's primarily the main reason of my update today is to share, one, the extension that we will be requesting to IAD, two, our mitigation and recovery plan. Not only are we putting together our recovery plan for our New Mexico capital outlay projects, but we are putting together our recovery plan for the citizen projects. And our citizen projects that were mainly impacted were year 1 and year 2. I just want to share also with RDC that when we talk about our recovery plan also includes the elevated or the inflated costs that we're now going to be seeing post-COVID. And I'll give you one example of just one project in Arizona. We recently supported a project funded. It was a chapter house plan, design, and construction. It was funded roughly around $4 million. However, even the local, that was the cost, and that was included with the cost of concrete being utilized or being purchased locally by a Navajo-owned business near Kayenta. Now that company is not only lacking enough concrete, but the cost of materials and supplies now coming onto the nation will be seeing an elevated cost. So if we can't get concrete locally, we're going to have to get concrete off the nation. That will change that overall cost for what was originally pre-funded or funded pre-COVID. So if we funded a chapter house at $3.8 million and post-COVID, it's going to cost a little bit more than that original 3.8 to build. And that's part of our recovery plan. We have to address some of the elevated costs. So in our request for these extensions, and I say this respectfully, it's not to bail us out. It's not to kick a can down the road. It's really to help us adjust and reevaluate what the cost of each of these projects will be and what the overall nation, not the Navajo Nation, but the nation will be looking at for cost for materials and supplies, and what we will be looking at on the Navajo Nation for materials to be delivered onto the nation. So I do want to share briefly, resource and development, that when we are in communications with IAD, we are requesting for an extension. Our projects are moving, but they are moving very slowly due to our staff working from home, telecommuting, and our ability to meet the building capacity. And then quite honestly, we have experienced both positive cases and exposure in our building. That also interrupts our ability to focus on many of these projects. I am submitting our report here, and I will be emailing that here shortly. It is a brief report, but I do want to share that portion of our communications with New Mexico. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Yellowman. And I'd like to establish a motion and a second. Motion.
Chairman, I'll motion Freeland.
Thank you. Second by.
Stewart.
Thank you, Honorable Stewart. Any questions or comments for Dr. Yellowman? Naitos Kirishnanda.
Chairman, Freeland.
Honorable Freeland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman, as well as Dr. Yellowman. Thank you for that update. Just wanted just to express my concerns. This is, the legislature did start yesterday, and chapters will be requesting for new projects. We don't want this request to hamper or impede any new requests, because that's usually the case with, in these situations when a capital outlay bill does get placed at the governor's desk. They always question the Navajo Nation is not spending their money or projects are not moving. They always find some sort of case against us to use against our chapters. So I hope this is not the case, and I really hope IED gets that message clear. And then the other concern I have is that these projects, we have to be reminded that these projects are STB as well. They're under the severance tax bond. So that means that whether we ask for an extension or not, we still have to hold our end of the extension requests. We're obligated to these projects, and we are on a timeline. With us being on the having to comply with the state, we have to abide by what the state does, our state says, and you're well aware of that, Dr. Yellowman. I'm really concerned that, because they're STB, or some of them could be general funds, even more case seriousness of in cases of general funded projects, the state could easily pull those out from underneath of us if they want to. If they're in a money crunch or if they're in a dire situation for funding, all they need to do is pull the plug on those general fund projects. And that's the part I'm afraid of, is if we're not spending any of these general fund monies, we're not making any progress. We have to comply with the special criteria. We did ask, when we became delegates, that was one of the first asks to the new governor was to, do away with the special criteria, but she said no. This is from an executive order from 2012. So we still have to comply with that, and we still have to, you mentioned working with OMB and OOC and DOJ. Yes, there's a huge part of it, but we still have to be reminded, and I'm glad the PMs usually are on top of this as far as distinguishing STB or general funded projects. So if you could really watch those general funded projects too, because the state could easily pull those away if they find themselves in a money crunch, or they're going to be dealing with a budget increase actually this year, $7 billion. So it's a huge, it's almost like a 30% increase in their budget. But where are they going to find the money? And they always start looking at our projects. And I always remember when the state was at a $90 million deficit, and we had to scramble, and we had to protect our projects. So I really ask and implore that you please do the same. Please protect our projects as much as you can. If you need our help, if you need my help, my colleagues' help, please let us know. We want to protect these projects, and if the state goes after them, we'll be there to help. But I'm really concerned with this legislative session. We don't know what's going to happen. They are looking for new revenues, yes, and recreational marijuana is one new revenue source that they're looking at that we haven't discussed yet. But how are we going to indicate that, the Navajo Nation means business, we're getting our projects done, and we want to protect our chapters projects as much as we can. And then finally, I think the big thing for us is to really look at which projects we can help fund as well. And I always, I actually mentioned this to one of my chapters yesterday, was usage of the capital outlay match fund. And, if we could look at projects that are ready to go, that need extra dollars, that capital outlay match fund is there for that reason, to help fully fund these projects, because, some of them are just needing a few $1,000s more here and there. So I just wanted to encourage you all again, Dr. Yellowman, and please let us know if you need help, and let us know when you're going to have the next recon meeting too with the state. I really want to be, we all want to be a part of that, because, having 55 chapters in New Mexico that can go to the state and ask for capital outlay or apply for TIF money, or even aging projects that you mentioned, those are different. Those are voted on, but we still need to get those completed as well. So I know chapters are really keen about remodeling or fixing. In my case, at Crown Point, we need a new roof at the senior center because the roof is leaking. Kitchen equipment, new vans, things of that nature. So we're here to help. We're here to advocate, and we want to protect our projects too. So please let us know how we can be of service. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Freeland. Every word that you spoke was what I was thinking of. Thank you. The New Mexico chapters, we really need to stay on top of it too. Yes, sir. And I appreciate you, Honorable Freeland, for really knowing and providing information to the New Mexico chapters. You know the process with the Santa Fe folks over there. So, yeah, Dr. Yellowman, I just want to say thank you as well for this and requesting this extension through the Indian Affairs Department of New Mexico. So, yeah. Any other questions or comments, Nanda? Dr. Yellowman?
Thank you, Chair. Delegate Freeland. I want to add that I was listening into the New Mexico State legislative session yesterday. I was able to catch the discussion on the capital outlay projects, and I am trying to follow those discussions as much as I can. There were some concerns that were brought up, and there were some recommendations, as I know that those are proposed recommendations, and they will be moving forward with projects starting 2021. Again, those are early proposed recommendations that the legislative session was discussing yesterday. I also want to add that I do have some recommendations, and I believe in the past I have asked for some assistance, and I'd be glad to make a little bit more of a serious or a hard request, but we really do need, and I am assuming that the projects or the management under OOC in regards to the projects are either by location, because that's how it is with Sihiston. So with other departments like OMB, they have one person does not take care of all of the projects, is what I'm saying. But in our case, we are asking for an individual from OOC who can be dedicated to these sessions when we know that New Mexico is coming through with funded projects. There's usually a timeline where the bonds are executed, and then we have the IGAs. In that period between the IGAs and our 164s that need to be completed, that's when we need all hands on deck. We need representation from OOC, and we need representation from OMB and DOJ to all be concentrated on completing these IGAs so that we can issue these projects out for the nation. So we do have some strong recommendations on our internal side to streamline some of these processes. The other recommendation, again, these are new recommendations. We're still formulating these recommendations, and we are trying to put them together in our recovery plan. But I can verbally share them right now. But for example, some of our projects, so last year, 2020, we were impacted by COVID. Because things are still unknown and we're still going into 1 year of this next 2021, we still will be possibly operating the way we're operating now. We're still going to be needing wearing masks. We're still going to need to sanitize. And even if we go 1 year operating in how we are currently operating, we still need to set some criteria as to the projects we need to focus on. So even for the next year or the year and a half, I would be making some recommendations that we internally review all of the projects that meet some type of COVID criteria. And even some of the projects that I mentioned today for New Mexico, many of them are power line, water line. Some of them in our citizen are bathroom addition. My recommendations is that those are the projects that I would elevate as a priority. Or if we're looking at just focusing on how to recover and to assist our Navajo people in keeping hygiene and keeping safe from COVID, those are some of the projects I would recommend that we focus on. And I say this because we still have projects, even we have projects on our reauthorization list, and we have projects in our citizen projects, in our citizen listing that, and I say this respectfully, that do not quite meet that emergency criteria. But that doesn't mean they're not important, but they are projects like a skateboard park or a picnic park. And I'm not saying that there's value to those projects, but just given the situation we are in right now, I recommend that as a nation and to the leadership, we really look wholeheartedly at what COVID has taught us, what we need to do to make those projects a priority, the power line, water line, and even some of those bathroom additions. And when we look at renovations now, we even have to reconsider the scope of work on the renovations to look at the bathrooms and make sure that our bathrooms have some type of compliance to addressing COVID. We do now live in a new world with COVID, and we were impacted greatly. And we're just going to have to redesign what this means for our projects moving forward. Those are still part of our recovery plans that we're putting together. Not only are our projects going to be impacted fiscally, but even the scope of work will have to be reassessed and redesigned just to adhere to how we're going to look at safety moving forward. We can't be impacted this much as a Navajo Nation and not change how we're going to look at infrastructure, especially during the last 7 months when infrastructure was a great need throughout the Navajo Nation. And I say that because when we started to plan our subrecipient agreements for the CARES Act funds, we put those subrecipient agreements and partnerships in place so that when the December 30th deadline passed, we can still move forward with some of the mechanisms and partnerships that we established with NECA and NTUA and other utility companies, just so that we can continue to move forward on that. So Chair, I appreciate the support. We do need help. I am asking RDC for continued support and for continued assistance in gathering individuals from OOC, and we'll work on OMB. When we need to issue out these IGAs, that's such a critical time, and that reassures the chapters that we're focused on moving these projects forward when we can group or have these 164 meetings. I also have some recommendations on how we can adjust or how we can streamline some of the 164 process as well. So I'll conclude there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Yellowman. Honorable Freeland, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Yellowman. I really appreciate your response, and want to ask and of course really request that you continue to focus on the basic infrastructure needs. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's so important. Whenever we can bring running water or lights to children that can do their homework at night, especially in the wintertime when the sun goes down early, or bring a commode or a shower, bathtub, or a sink for elders to utilize in the form of a bathroom addition, that's a win-win for our people. And when we can look at basic infrastructure development, and I'm really going to ask my chapters to kind of take a look at from that perspective as well, humanistic needs. How can we address those basic infrastructure needs going forward, especially because of the time that we're dealing with, the pandemic that we're dealing with. I wish we could have done more with CARES, yes, but that's in the past. We have to look at different avenues. We have to seek new avenues and new opportunities for our people to help them. I have one chapter alone. 38 homes do not have running water, but that's a situation where we have to deal with land status. And we have to, yes, we can do all the planning, we can look for funding, but one of the biggest hurdles for us in Eastern Navajo is the complexity of 23 different land statuses. And when we can't get a right of way from the BLM or a private landowner, then that just really, it puts things back in the back seat of our chapters. And I really, working with the chapters and knowing what their goals are, knowing that they develop their ICIPs, and the ICIPs do get developed or get passed by the community, they get presented. Chapters really are on top of this, and they know how to seek funding, how to help people. And especially, working with my 8 chapters, but I really want to emphasize that if we can start looking at that, is addressing the 3 basic infrastructure, the humanistic factor of running water, electricity, and bathroom addition. So I just wanted to mention that, Chair, and thank you again.
Thank you, Honorable Freeland. Honorable members of RDC, any other comments or questions? We're currently at 3:45, Nanda. No comments or questions. We'll go ahead and vote to accept the report from Dr. Yellowman.
Chairman, can I just add one more response to Delegate Freeland?
Make it brief.
Yes, sir. The Navajo Nation will be hosting the next recon, and we are scheduling that for February 2021. When we set the date, we'll be sure to inform RDC and the New Mexico chapters. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable members of RDC, are you ready to vote? Okay. Honorable Freeland, how do you vote, sir?
Green.
Honorable Stewart?
Green.
Honorable Beguet, text, he votes green. Honorable Vice Chair Walker?
Chair, I vote green.
Honorable Daniels? We have a vote of 4 in favor, 0 opposed. Chair not voting. Motion carries. We'll accept the report from Dr. Yellowman. Thank you. Next, let me go back up to Chamber of Commerce. The next Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Derek Watchman. Are you on the line? Mr. Watchman? None? Okay. Crown Point Hotel, Division of Economic Development. Mr. J.T. Willie, are you on the line? Honorable Freeland, is Mr. Willie going to provide this report?
Hello. It's actually. Go ahead.
Yeah, hey, this is
Yes.
Derek Watchman. I think I unmuted myself. If you can hear me.
I can hear you now, but let me go back to you, but let me go to Honorable Freeland.
Uncle Shane.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm actually going to ask Mr. Willie, if Mr. Willie's not available, Mr. John Largo to give an update.
Okay, Mr. Largo.
Yes, this is John Largo with the Eastern RBDO under the Division of Economic Development, and I know you're hurting for time, Mr. Chairman, so I'll try to make it as brief as possible. Basically, Delegate Freeland asked me to do an update on the Crown Point Hotel, and what has happened is we're basically because of financing, we tried to get outside financing for the project with Native American Bank with the tenant, but it's just not going to work out.
Chairman, we can't hear him.
Hello, can you guys hear me? Hello?
Yes,
John
go ahead
Largo,
now.
I can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes, this is Al
Yes.
Henderson. I can hear you.
Mr. Largo,
Yes,
I
can you hear me?
hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I apologize for that. I was on, maybe it's because I was on speakerphone, but so I took the speaker off. Basically, wanted to try to briefly give you a update on the hotel project. Like I was saying earlier, the business tenant CSB Enterprise had initially secured a small business loan of $9 million from Native American Bank and matching with permanent trust funds and sales tax funds to build a 72-room hotel in Crown Point. But because of the way the loan was structured, it wasn't working out with Department of Justice and the Controller's Office, and so we had to basically pull the loan off the table. So what was suggested by the controller was to just do like a regular Division of Economic Development project where we just used the funds provided by the tribe to build a hotel and downsize the hotel and build a smaller hotel, and then just lease the property, lease the building to the tenants. So that was how we decided to move forward with the project. So our division director, J.T. Willie, had a meeting with in-house with the staff of DED, and they determined that they could provide a little more financing, $2 million for the project, so we can build a decent-sized hotel. So we're looking at a 35 to 40-room hotel in Crown Point, and possibly to phase maybe additional rooms later once more funding comes in. So right now that is what we have on the table. We're waiting for direction from the Controller and Department of Justice to move forward. The Controller is asking for additional documentation from the business tenants, like the business plan, pro formas, and other information from them to determine their they just want to make sure the tenant is is qualified to do the project, and basically Division of Economic Development has already done this. We've done due diligence on the business tenant, CSB Enterprises, and the bank also did due diligence in order to secure a $9 million loan. But this is what we're doing right now, working with the controller and DOJ. And once everybody is okay with this, if the controller and DOJ is okay with this process, then we will work on getting a construction contract in place to build a hotel. And we already have a business site lease in place with the business tenants, so we're basically ready to move forward. And I just like to thank Delegate Freeland and JT Willie, our division director, for keeping this project moving forward and wanting this project to happen. So he just asked me to give a report on the project and how it's moving along, and that hopefully we'll get this project underway. And the same thing goes for the 2 C stores, one in Church Rock, one in Crown Point. We're kind of ran into the same issues with the bank financing, but we'll be able to build both convenience stores. And we do have contractors that are in place. The bidding has gone out. We have contractors for all 3 projects. We just need to go ahead from the controller and DOJ to move forward. So, but Mr. Delegate Freeland is really pushing the projects forward, along with Delegate Jamie Henio and Delegate Edmund Yazzie. So that's kind of it, unless I missed anything, Delegate Freeland. That's where we're at. I just wanted to provide that brief report to the Resource Development Committee. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Largo, for that. Honorable members of RDC, let's establish a motion and a second.
Chairman, I'll motion.
Thank you. Second by?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Stewart. Any questions?
Chairman, I just wanted to make a comment.
Chairman,
Go right ahead.
Chairman, before you move on, can you repeat the motion and second? I could barely hear you.
Okay. Motion by Honorable Freeland, second by Honorable Stewart. Did you get it?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Honorable Freeland, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for listening in on this report. I just wanted for you all to get a grasp on what's been going on and the challenges that we have been faced through the entrepreneur, but also through DED. We were set up for a larger project, but it didn't work out because of the financing and the bank and issues with the loan itself. So we had to downscale it. As oversight to Division of Economic Development through this committee, I just wanted you all to get an idea, because this is a citizen project, and we're doing our best to try to make this project move. And we're so close right now that, working with the controller and OOC, yes, we do have to abide by Navajo Nation laws, which we're doing, but we also have to make sure that, we want to try to get this project construction started as well. We did do groundbreaking through Crown Point chapter last year, and a few of you were there. But I just wanted to ask for your support on this project going forward. I know there was questions before that were brought up by Budget and Finance Committee. Why is this project not moving? But if anyone were to ask you, you did get information straight from the source. I don't want to say straight from the horse's mouth, but straight from the source. But I just want to ask for your support. And for us in Eastern and Crown Point especially, we're an agency hub, but we're years behind others like Shiprock or Tuba City or Chinle, Kayenta. We don't have the economic development like they do. and we have a lot of tourism opportunity on Highway 371, the traffic that goes to Chaco Canyon or to Farmington. And we also have doctors and nurses at Crown Point Service Unit, Department of Defense personnel that came in to help with the COVID situation as well. They don't have a place to stay, and a lot of them are having to commute between Grants and Gallup as well. So, this hotel would be a great opportunity to, number one, provide a source of revenue in the form of taxes to the Navajo Nation, but number two, give close proximity to those personnel that are helping our people fight COVID-19. So, area chairman, I just want to make that comment as well and say thank you to the Division of Economic Development. We have Mr. Willie, JT Willie, Miss Brenda Jesus, who's Eastern RDBO manager, and Mr. John Largo have all been participating on these calls. So I very much appreciate them and what they're trying to do. And we also are trying to look at a C-store and laundromat. We don't have a laundromat in Crown Point, so we're trying to get that going as well. But ADI chairman, want to say thank you and appreciate the support. Thanks.
Thank you, Honorable Freeland, Ado, Mr. Largo. Thank you. We'll go ahead and accept the report. If there's no questions. Honorable Freeland, how do you vote?
Green.
Honorable Stewart?
Green.
Honorable Begay? Honorable Vice Chair Walker?
Chairman, I vote.
Thank you. Honorable Daniels? We have a vote of 3 in favor, 0 opposed. Chair not voting, motion carries. We'll accept a report from Mr. Largo on Crown Point Hotel. Yeah. One more report, Fernanda. The Net Chamber of Commerce is on the line with us. We have Mr. Al Henderson as well as Mr. Derek Watchman. Mr. Watchman, you have the floor, sir. Star 6.
Oh, yes, sir. I'm on. So, yeah, Mr. Chairman and members of the RDC, Chair Derek Watchman. I also have Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson, are you on with me? Well, hopefully they'll join, but Yat Shea Derek Watchman, Ice Kidney and Shlan, Tohana Bashishin, Totnazani, Desha Chayado, Tobahashanela, Navajo, New Mexico, Adena Shahado. I'm a consultant. I have my company, Sagebrush Hill Group, LLC, Adena Nalnish, but I'm also an active member in the Net Chamber of Commerce, and so we appreciate the help of Delegate Stewart in facilitating and allowing us to do a very, very brief report today on the Net Chamber of Commerce. And so we appreciate everybody on the line here. We did send to Shammy, Mr. Chair, a PowerPoint presentation. So I'm assuming that the RDC members and yourself, Mr. Chairman, have a copy of it. So I will run through it as quickly as I can. I know that you've been in your meeting almost six hours, and so we appreciate you hanging in there to listen to what the chamber has to report on. So, Mr. Chairman, without further ado, I'll go through the report.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. I'll just go through the slides, but the agenda basically is to have introductions and talk about the Net Chamber of Commerce. Our vision on what economic development is, a short explanation of our accomplishments, efforts, experiences, and solutions, and then what we think are some of the issues and what we think as the chamber needs to consider going forward. And so, but first of all, introductions. Mr. Jefferson Begay, our chair, I think he lives in Navajo Mountain, so sometimes communication is bad from that area, but the Net Chamber has a 10-member board. As you see on this slide, Jefferson Begay is our chair, Tom Curly Hair is our vice chair, Mr. Al Henderson, our secretary, Erica Guy, our treasurer, and then we have members including John Lewis, Liddell Davies, Joanne Begay-Nota, Dwayne Aspis, Aaron Shorty, Cecilia So, and our job is basically to represent our Navajo businesses that operate here on Navajo and off Navajo. For myself, I'm a volunteer, and if you look at what chambers do around the country in our areas, a lot of volunteer members, and so I've been doing, my part to help the chamber. I also, and the reason why I do that is I'm chairman of the board of a national board called the National Center for American Indian Enterprise Development, and we do the annual Reservation Economic Summit that we have annually in Las Vegas, and usually it's in March, but I think the National Center is going to have to push that conference out to December or so, or July or December, depending on, when we get feedback on COVID. And so I'm a volunteer, trying to do my part to really bring awareness, to the chambers. And so, but the chamber itself, moving on to the next slide, we were established in 2013. And we established ourselves as a nonprofit under Navajo law. And we also have a tax exempt designation through the IRS. And so categorically, we're a 501c6. And basically what that designation is, and it's different from a 501c3, which I think there was discussion about creating, one of the presentations earlier, creating a nonprofit. Those are 501c3s. Our association is a 501c6, so basically it's an association of persons having a common business interest and promoting common economic interests of all businesses. And so categorically, our mission is to advocate for our Navajo businesses. And so, those are the basic foundations, that we try to uphold. And so moving on to the next slide, one of the basic principles that we try to facilitate is economic development. We think that's very, very important. It's always a big talk, and we heard that, with the previous discussion on the hotel. But for us, the goal for economic development, there's several goals, and that is, economic development helps create private investment, helps create jobs, helps create and expand the tax base. It creates wealth. When a small business person gets into business, he creates an income, he builds his inventory and he has wealth. That eventually leads to a better or higher quality of life and a higher standard of living. So, many businesses, including myself, looking for that American dream, if you will, or the Navajo dream. And so, many of us are now doing private consulting or trying to set up gas stations or trying to set up hotels. And so, but in terms of the economic development process, moving on to the next slide, the way the chamber looks at economic development is that, you need investment, you get investment, you construct a building, you build your asset, you go into business, you create jobs. By creating jobs, you lower the unemployment levels. You basically reduce poverty and you increase income. That increases demand, and then you basically have revenue that's created. You have revenues that are spent on the nation, which you think is very, very important. So you have a positive economic multiplier, which is what we believe is really needed here on the Navajo Nation. The more businesses you create, the less chance of our folks going off to border towns to spend their money. But to do that, if you go to the next slide, if you do that, what is, and that's why we're here today primarily, is what's the role of government. And in talking and working with the Chamber of Commerce's in Flagstaff, we had great relations with them, the Chamber in Page, the Chamber out of Farmington, the Chamber out of Gallup, and then recently the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce. We've been working with them, and all of them, including us, look to government, and the role of government, we believe, is to provide incentive to businesses, create positive business climates, to provide strategic leadership and facilitation to help induce and help create more businesses, and then obviously provide quality services and amenities. Earlier, Delegate Freeland talked about we need hotel space. We need convenience stores in Crown Point, and that's exactly what the Net Chamber of Commerce really seeks to provide and help facilitate. economic development, so that we have an economy, we have jobs, we have revenue, but more importantly, we have hotel beds, for example, or we have a place to buy our groceries, or we have a place to buy gasoline and service instead of having to go to Grants, Gallup, Farmington, Page, Flagstaff. And so that's our overall mission, and that's what we try to follow. The Chamber has been around for the last 8 years, and we've been working hard to help represent the 4,000 Navajo businesses that have registered through the Navajo Division of Economic Development. Over the last eight years, we've worked hard to provide technical assistance and management advisory services, similar to what we see with the Division of Economic Development. And within the last year, given COVID, you notice that the Chamber has been very active. So we've been interfacing with, for example, the RDC, the BNF, other components, including the Navajo Division of Economic Development. We also been talking with the state offices, for example, the Arizona Commerce Commission. We've been working with the United States Small Business Administration. And like I said earlier, we've been trying to interface with other chambers of commerces. During the CARES Act discussion, the Navajo Nation CARES Act, we obviously put in a proposal with the hope of being a part of the CARES funding process to facilitate funding out to the businesses. That didn't happen, but our job, we think, was complete to raise the awareness that our Navajo businesses are impacted because of COVID. And so during the last year, and everybody on this call is invited to join us every Monday at 1 o'clock. The Chamber has what we call a Monday call. And we will be next week on our 35th call. We have about between 75 and 150 people that call in. And we've had everybody from our Navajo enterprises that have joined to talk. We've had our congressional leadership. We've had SBA. And basically, what we've been trying to do is facilitate and provide information to our Navajo businesses, because in many cases, it's really hard to obtain that. Like, for example, with the CARES Act and the U.S. Congress created funding, we try to facilitate information on the payroll protection program loans, the economic impact disaster loans, and obviously provide information on the Navajo Nation Business and Artist Relief Fund. There's been a lot of state agencies that have put together and have had grant programs, so we've been trying to facilitate to the Navajo businesses. We're also, in the last couple of weeks, have been interfacing with our Navajos that represent us in the state legislators, for example. With New Mexico, for example, we're tracking a couple bills which I think are important, and I'll just note them real quick. Proposed Senate Bill 53. Yeah, it's a Senate bill in the New Mexico legislature that we're tracking. That particular proposal is basically trying to update the New Mexico procurement code to allow for tribal-owned businesses and enterprises to have an easier process in providing services and goods and supplies to the New Mexico government. We think that's a positive bill, and we support that. We also applied to the New Mexico Energy Transition Act. They had a RFI, and they had a deadline of October 31st. The Chamber submitted an application to hopefully provide economic development services. And we all know that the New Mexico Energy Transition Act basically is an act that helps promote clean and renewable energy, but more so, it's focused on the San Juan power plant and mine, and those two facilities are scheduled to shut down soon, within the next 1 to 2 years. When that happens, you're going to see over 400 employees that work at the mine and at the power plant, all of a sudden without jobs. And so our application to the New Mexico ETA is to help facilitate job training, job creation, and small business creation. And so, that's something that we're proud. We also done, a lot of other things. And so, but we just wanted to note that for members of the Resource and Development Committee. Going forward in terms of experiences, some of the things that we think is important is that in America, they say that 50% of jobs in America are from small businesses. And that's what we really like to see happen here on Navajo. We do have a small business economy, but obviously we want to be a part of growing that. And so, but how do you get there? You know, to get there, we think we got to look at the regulatory process, the infrastructure. And so we want to be a part of those discussions. There's some rules out there, for example, like the Navajo Business Opportunity Act, the Navajo Preference Policies, the Navajo Procurement Act. We think that if you do a few tweaks to that it will allow for more businesses to get into business, more businesses to grow. And so what we think going forward is that if, for example, we can create some incentives, you know, like, for example, the CARES Act, $714 million went through the Navajo Nation. How many Navajo small businesses benefited from that? Several, but we think that more can happen. And so as we move forward, like, for example, with the Biden-Harris administration, they're talking about more funding to tribes. They're talking about improving and increasing the small business procurement. We believe that we can set up our Navajo businesses to benefit from that. And obviously, the COVID-19 has impacted many people. We just heard, for example, the Navajo Arts and Crafts. There's many more businesses out there. You know, the flea markets, the artisans, the folks downtown in Winter Rock, you know, by the Alana Station. They can't operate. They are hurting. You know, how can we work together, you know, to support them? And so we just want to raise that, you know, to your attention. We think that going forward, and this is the big thing, is we're trying to figure out how to offer some solutions. You know, instead of complaining about, you know, the process, you know, how do we come up with some solutions? And so what we did in this slide is, okay, we think there's 4 critical areas that we believe if we address it will provide great solutions. One of the big ones is capital. We heard the report from the RDBO out at Crown Point. One of the big problems is capital. How do you get loans? How do you secure loans from banks? We have a great team and, you know, great members of our chamber who have, you know, good feedback. And so some of the things that we put on the table is, what about creating our own loan guarantee program? What about creating our own bond guarantee program? What about creating our working capital and a loan fund, almost similar to the BIDF? We think those things need to be looked at seriously. One of the things also is just collaboration. Our presentation today, we hope, is not the first and only report, but we move forward. We'd like the Navajo Nation Council and this committee to consider creating a subcommittee from the Navi primarily on small business. There's many opportunities on our land to create small businesses. And what that does is that it creates a tax base, it creates jobs. We also would like to continue our working relationship with the Division of Economic Development and the Division of Community Development. We think that's important. We're not doing this alone, I should say, members of the committee, Mr. Chair. We're working with Change Labs, for example. We're working with the other chambers. You know, we're trying to collaborate ideas, you know, because, you know, it is challenging to do economic development on Indian country and here on Navajo. You know, the whole business site leasing process, access to capital does create a cumbersome process. And so, you know, we think the collaboration is a big key. Now, when it comes to the RDC, obviously legislation we think is very important. A lot of our members are saying, you know, somehow, how can we get, when a small business gets a contract from the nation, like, for example, Mr. Sam Woods, he mentioned his business. You know, how can the nation pay him within 30 days or whatever terms are set up? Prompt and electronic payment, we think, will be very viable to help keep our businesses going. Provide tax incentives for our small businesses. We think that's important. Now, we talked about solicitation and awards. In some cases, you know, we'll see an enterprise or the nation advertise in the Gallup Independent or the Navajo Times. How can we make those processes more quick and efficient so that once an opportunity is advertised within a certain amount of days, the contractor goes to work? We think that's very important. Another idea is, how do we set up small business set-asides? The U.S. government, for example, through the Small Business Administration, has a mandate that every federal agency has to buy at least 23% of its purchases from Navajo or from small businesses. Now, what about putting that together for, our process here on Navajo? Should we, and we think that we should look at having some type of small business set aside so that our Navajo businesses have a fair shot at being able to provide goods and services, not only to the nation, but to our Navajo enterprises. We think that's very, very important. And then, of course, and I do it myself, I always have concerns about the business site leasing process, the Navajo Business Opportunity Act, and Navajo Nation procurement policies. We think that by looking and collaborating together, that we can make some tweaks so that it's easier for Navajo business to get work with the nation and the enterprises. We think that's a big solution in economic development. That's a big solution for expanding our Navajo small business sector. The last area of solutions is this technology. When a lot of us do business with the states or with the federal government, we can pay electronically online. In many cases, we can't do that. For me, for my business, I have tax bills every quarter with the Navajo Nation Tax Commission. I have to cut a check, but I have to pay my federal taxes. I basically go online and I pay it. And so how can we work together to provide a payment system electronically so that we can, pay our bills with the nation and we get it done? And one of the big things that we all know is just, the outdated internet and broadband system here on the nation. We see that the NAMI and the council is working on that, but we agree that it needs to be improved. It needs to be improved so that business and commerce can take place. So I'm almost done here, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, but going forward, the chamber would really like for members of the Resource and Development Committee to think about a couple of things. Several. One is that small business creates jobs, and we know this. Small business generates taxes, the sales tax, the hotel tax. The small businesses do that. And so that's their basically contribution to the Navajo economy. Small businesses support the Navajo Nation and enterprises with its skills and resources. We have a lot of talented Navajo businesses, and, they're looking for work and they need to work. Small business is the private sector on Navajo. We think that, there's many, many opportunities to grow. Small business provides services and supplies to the Navajo Nation, including the enterprises. We think that more can happen. And then finally, we believe that we need to continue to collaborate and partner with each other. The small businesses, the enterprises, the Navajo Nation. We're also talking with the Net College. We're also talking with Navajo Technical University, and really try to focus on, how do we continue to grow the Navajo economy? How do we grow our Navajo small businesses? So at the end of the day, we create jobs, we create revenue, and that improves all of our lives here on Navajo. We think that's very, very important. So with that, Mr. Chairman and members of the RDC, it's a brief report. We appreciate your time. I don't know if Chairman Begay or Secretary Henderson have joined us, but if they are, maybe they can give some concluding remarks. If they are, we'll do that. If not, I'm open for questions on behalf of the Net Chamber of Commerce. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the RDC.
Thank you, Mr. Watchman. Honorable members of RDC, would like to establish a motion and a second.
Motion, Stuart.
Thank you. Second by?
Freeland. Chairman, I'll second.
Okay, Honorable Walker. Thank you. Any questions?
Comment, Chair.
Okay, go ahead, Honorable Stewart.
Okay. Staff, Mr. Watchman, Mr. Henderson, and all others involved with the Net Chamber. Okay, this report, this presentation, RDC members, these meetings that they have, I try to participate in them as often as I can on Monday afternoons at 1 o'clock. And they assist the small businesses is what I look at. In following their discussions, following their meetings, I personally feel that they would be a great asset and a help to the Division of Economic Development because of what we met with them on a couple of weeks ago during this session. And I think that, them helping each other would really improve our Division of Economic Development on both sides. And it would really assist our small businesses. With the hardship funding, again, that we had small businesses reach out to us that didn't meet the deadline. And we couldn't really help because we didn't know exactly what happened until after the fact. Right now, with this expertise that's happening here and this collaboration that's going on, where we don't hear many reports such as this from Division of Community Development right now, or Division of Economic Development, sorry, except the two. And so I think that, if we can have a work session with the two, Division of Economic Development, the NED Chamber, and whoever else that our advisor, Shamamas Bigay, may suggest and recommend, maybe involve the DOJ as well, to see what we need to do to improve our Division of Economic Development across the nation, because there are a lot of projects out there. There are empty facilities that we have in each of our communities that have to be used for some type of small business to grow and develop. I've always talked about Red Lake, how we want the grocery store up there reopened, and in talking with Navajo shopping centers, that's what they're looking at. But they're looking at a different, like a country store, for the local people to take their agricultural products there to sell, their sheep to sell, and that's what we're looking at on that side now, to make it more like your neighborhood friendly country store. So that's what we're looking at. So I think ideas like that need to happen, Shania, Kedo, Shajaya, and I think with the two involved and our collaborations together with them, I think we can make these things happen. Shania, thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Stewart. We could put it on the next RDC agenda to request a work session with the Net Chamber of Commerce, because today we're down at the end of our meeting and we kind of get tired of being on these phones sometimes. So we'll try to pay attention as much as possible. And then we have other meetings too. So we can have a work session there, Shananta. Is there any comments or questions from our colleagues? Atenya Hakushila. Thank you, Mr. Watchman, for your presentation.
Oh, yeah.
I'd like to go ahead and vote to accept the report. Honorable Freeland, how do you vote?
Green.
Honorable Stewart?
Green.
Honorable Begay? Honorable Vice Chair Walker?
Chairman, I vote green.
Honorable Daniels?
I vote green. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a vote of 4 in favor, 0 opposed. Chair not voting. Motion carries. We'll accept the report from the Net Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Mr. Watchman.
Thank you, sir. Cat.
Oh, Biga. None die. I believe we're pretty much done with all our reports and everything. We're down to the conclusion of our meeting. Is there any announcements? None. Motion to adjourn.
Motion, Freeland. Motion, Chair. Daniel.
Okay, Honorable Freeland and Honorable Daniels. Any comments or questions? None. Honorable Freeland, how do you vote?
Green.
Honorable Stewart?
Green.
Honorable Begay? Honorable Vice Chair Walker,
Chairman, I vote green. Thank you.
Honorable Daniels.
Green.
We have a vote of 4 in favor, 0 opposed. Chair not voting. It's 4:26, and we're adjourned at this time. Be safe out there, and have a good evening. Thank you, staff. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chair. Committee members.
Thank you, Chair. Be safe.
Oh, Biga.